Hey everybody, and welcome to episode number 26 of the Final Split. It is the technical difficulties episode. Barely getting started, 20 minutes late, no big deal. Hopefully all the videos will work that we're going to show you in the show, but for now, everything is just fine. Don't touch anything. Everybody sit still at home, and hopefully everything will work. Returning, as always, in the red box is our resident fro, Spike Vegeta.
Barely staying inside the box today.
Yeah.
I don't know what my webcam's doing.
Gonna
have to cut this soon just to fit.
You have to sit further back in your room in future episodes. You're getting too close. What'd you do this week, Spike?
Was on another week of my tour. This was the hardest week. We had like a 22 show week.
Oh my God.
22 shows in 5 days. So yeah. You start to question, am I getting paid enough for this? No. But also, as soon as I got back, I remembered, oh yeah, I've got a marathon run or two to do this weekend. So yeah, did Rayman Legends and just finished Tropical Freeze like 2 hours ago. So
and
yeah.
How those go for you?
They were speed runs. We beat the video games under the estimate time.
Hey, that's all that matters. That's
nailed it. Yeah. So yeah, it was a good week.
I would describe my mega marathon run as the same. I was under the estimate. That's all that I wanted.
It's a speed run that was less than the time I gave them. That's nailed it.
Awesome. All right, and joining us this week we have two guests who are, I believe, both making their debut, if I'm not mistaken, on the show. No surprises yet. Okay, we're gonna hit an episode eventually where I don't remember if someone's been on the show or not. I know it's gonna happen.
I'm gonna be new.
I was on episode 1. Don't you remember?
And then like the super awkward moment. In our green box today we have Test Runner. Everybody, welcome, Test Runner.
Thank you. Nice to be here. It's awesome.
Good to have you. Good to have you. What have you been up to lately?
Mostly school, which has been kind of making me not able to speedrun.
Okay, yeah, that usually happens. That usually happens, but
yeah.
Hopefully, you get some time eventually.
Yeah.
And also joining us in our blue box today, we've got Supreme, who's had a pretty busy week himself. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm pretty tired, but we're here. Sorry if I sound a little congested. I'm getting over a cold, but Mega Marathon chugs on nonetheless, which is what I've been working on.
Yeah, you've got the same experience I had with JRTA a couple weeks ago. You're kind of assuming the lead role.
Yeah, and it's been something. That's about the best word I have to describe it.
But it's good to see that it's going along well anyway, and lots of people sticking around for the weekend. So, have you guys run into any like big issues so far? It seems like it's been going pretty smooth for the most part. But
the opener was a little rough. Some of our stuff, we had some nice little fancy components, but that were run off of someone's server, and they were not quite working up to par. So the start was a little rough. And then right off the bat, Karua's internet pretty much died on him, so we had to replace the second run, excuse me. So, but yeah, after that it started to smooth out a lot. It's been picking up some steam.
Okay, well that's good to hear. So hopefully it rides out to the finale just fine, and it's always interesting to me. Like, I don't know, I did that one-day marathon like a year ago, and I thought like, okay, well that doesn't seem too bad. Let's try to do a weekend one, and it's a whole different beast.
Absolutely.
The amount of people that you have to micromanage and keep track of, just like who's still actually going to be around, and what happens when someone doesn't show up. It's an experience, but hopefully you hold up through the rest of the weekend, and hopefully Mega Marathon finishes strong too. We got a lot to talk about today, and most of it is actually going to revolve around our marathon schedule here, HDQ. That is, so we'll go ahead and dive right into it here. First of all, I'm going to link the schedule for everybody in the chat in case you, for whatever reason, haven't had the chance to check it out yet. There it is. But I guess the first thing I want to talk about, and we'll mention more topics later, is let's just look at the first game of the marathon and the last game of the marathon. I want your opinions on
That's all you really need.
Okay. First of all, I want to know how much Spike did you pay to get Tropical Freeze as the first game? What did you do? How did you manage that there? What?
I apparently didn't pay enough because I'm part of the maybe others category for this game. Well, I think it's a really how do I want to describe this? It makes sense. It kind of lines up with what they just did with AGDQ or with SGDQ, Super Mario 3D World. It's, obviously looking at the schedule, what's the number one thing that screams to us? Nintendo is what brings in the viewers. Nintendo is what people like. They have the biggest fan base. Those people have nostalgia for it. So it's the new game. People know about it. If I had to be 100% honest, I feel like games like this serve a better purpose if it was when they initially came out. So, like, if this was the opener for SGDQ, that would have been perfect. But for AGDQ, it will have been 10 months. Hopefully, people will still, say, okay, it's the new thing. We'll show up for it. It's got good music. It's got a lot of cool speed tech, and we'll see. The only thing that's interesting to me about it is Mike is considering letting it be some sort of a race with, and we'll get more into this as we get into the schedule. There's a lot of races in this marathon. Right. Do you want the marathon of races to be kicked off with a race, whether it's 2-way, 3-way?
Yeah, has that ever? I don't think that's ever been done before, has it? With a race to start a major marathon, anyway.
Yeah. So, interesting storyline there, and we'll figure out by November 15th, I think he said, who all is going to exactly be running each of the games. So, but it's going to be fun. I think it's a big honor. I was just talking to my Tropical Freeze community, and we're honored to kick off the marathon. So let's do it. Let's have fun.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And the Wii U hasn't really had that many titles released anyway. We're up to like 3 games on the Wii U. So it's not like you mentioned it kind of being like this old news at this point, but I guess the reality of it is it's still kind of a fresh Wii U title.
Sure.
If you want to look at it like that. But Supreme Test Runner, what do you think about Tropical Freeze?
I like to echo Spike's point. I think it's smart to lead off with a fresh, somewhat fresh at least, new title that's going to catch the eye of not only the speedrunning community, but people who may be looking for these newer games on Twitch.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we also had a DKCR at a past SGDQ with a pretty early on the marathon, and so it's not too surprising to see DKC Tropical Freeze open the marathon too, because it's kind of following the same pattern of the past marathons.
Right. And it's very I think speedruns like this are very traditional. A lot of people, when they talk about speedrunners, I think they generally think of like 2D platformers. I think it's like just the most kind of traditional bare bones. I can jump in. I don't even need commentary necessarily. I can understand, get from the left side to the right side of the screen as fast as I can.
It's the most visually obvious definition of the word. Like when people think of speedrun, okay, you're moving fast across the screen. That makes sense. Like,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I agree with what you mentioned too. You kind of said, the start of the marathon's always kind of been a newer game or something that maybe hasn't really had a chance to be defined by a marathon yet. Like if you go with something that's too familiar, like a Super Metroid or something, there's already kind of an established history to it. It's not really, marathon defining, so to speak. It doesn't really set the marathon off on its own tone.
Right.
So I don't know. I like it. I think it's a good choice. It's an interesting choice.
And it's also not. Go ahead.
I think it's a good barometer for maybe doing something like it in the future. Like, if Tropical Freeze starts off the marathon really well, maybe that's something you include. You don't include Super Metroid at the start because you want that build up to maximize the amount of people who can see it, who are willing to donate for it. And so I think it's good to test these as a barometer.
Yeah, and so depending on what the reaction is to it, then maybe that kind of helps influence where it goes in future marathons, that kind of thing.
Sure.
Let me ask you.
Negative Nancy thing about this is that it's the one thing that concerns me is that the fact that it is potentially a race, because it's not just a race. In terms of tech, it's also an HD race, which is a lot harder to deal with usually, and this could. Like this kind of thing, opening the marathon might delay the marathon, that kind of stuff, and that in itself worries me. I wonder if there's another kind of modern 2D platform where you could have selected like the new Super Mario Brothers Wii or some other platformer game that's kind of the same kind of general style. Right. So that's the one thing that kind of worries me. But overall, I like having the game there.
Yeah, I was going to say, layout-wise, I'm not too familiar with this, but I think just streaming one 16:9 feed by itself is difficult. There's not a lot you can do with a layout once you've got 16:9 on the screen, let alone 2 or 3 screens that are going to be in that ratio. I don't know what kind of problem that presents, but...
Yeah, that does bring up a danger of your screen sizes being too small. And I know we were looking at our layouts for Mega Marathon, and we had one 16 by 9 race, and the feeds were already pretty small. So going with four kind of is going to make it difficult to see a little bit. So
Right.
I could see maybe including one other runner, but I don't know if they would. I don't think it would be smart to go with three or four
Right.
because
Yeah,
that
at that
that
point, it's congestion.
And at this point, the way that community we're handling it is we're doing these 10 no reset runs in the next 2 weeks, and then we're just going to give Mike the data, and then he can do what he will with it. And we're just going to kind of have fun with it and see what happens.
So so as far as you guys are concerned, if it ends up being a race, it does. If not, you guys all did your I guess your qualifiers, if you want to call them that.
Sure.
AGDQ
We kind of wanted to
qualifiers.
make like a playoffs of system of sorts to get to this point.
Playoffs.
Yeah, we're talking about playoffs.
All right, so let's talk about the
So bad.
finale then. So finale this time around, Ocarina of Time with ZFG, 100%. And I guess if you want to include Runner Guy too as well, they kind of coincide.
Yeah.
I believe he's doing some blindfolded child dungeons right before that, so kind of a double dose of OOT. What do you think about this for an AGDQ finale?
They're trying something different. That was the number one thing that a lot of people clamored for is, again, even people like you and me, Golden, who like Final Fantasies. I like Final Fantasy speedruns, and definitely think they have their own place in the marathon. But it was Mike simply saying, okay, I'm going to try something different. I'm going to give you your Ocarina of Time. The night before, you got Super Mario RPG in the same kind of slot. Final Fantasy VII is being bumped up. This also, to note, though, this isn't just completely Mike giving in. Again, Final Fantasy VII, it's not your traditional category. It's not it wouldn't have been the traditional way to end the marathon. They bumped it up because it's the short 3-hour Yuffie glitch category.
Right.
That being said, I think Ocarina of Time 100% is a great way to end the marathon. I think it'll bring in a lot of people. I will say I debate how many people at the marathon after claiming for this will still actually show up for it.
Right.
I'm feeling like people at the end of the marathon just want to hang out with one another. This is the last time I'm maybe going to see these people for a year, possibly more than that. So I'm still not going to watch ZFG and Runner Guy, but it's something different. It's hopefully something more so for the viewers at home,
Right.
to keep them more engaged.
I think one of the really difficult things about picking a finale game is that you're going to either lose the appeal to the people that are at the venue, or you're going to lose the appeal to the people at home. Like one way or the other, it's a tough balance. If you're going to pull people into that room, it's got to be a really big race between people that are well known and popular, and there's kind of like a rivalry there, or it's got to be somebody whose commentary really drives the whole thing.
Or breaking $1 million.
Right. Or you just got to have somebody who's a big fanboy. Or everybody's a big fanboy of that person, and they're all in the room anyway. But yeah, no, I think this is a good choice. It's unique. It's different. I mean, obviously, it's Ocarina of Time, so for me to say unique and different for Ocarina of Time kind of sounds
Sure.
like, what are you talking
in a
about?
category that has been done before.
I can't wait to see like the meme picture with my face like smiling, and it says like Ocarina of Time, unique and different. Like, it's gonna happen. It's already out there, I guarantee you. But
to roll off your point about the name, though, I think that's something important to look at as well. The fact that it's ZFG. Now, I've only been to one GDQ, and that was last year's AGDQ. But when ZFG got there were so many people clustered around him watching him play Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. So I think it's important to. I think that is something to that's going to bring in both the people at home and bring in the people in the donate or in that at the actual marathon, because we have to remember a lot of people who are not necessarily speed runners are starting to attend these events,
Right.
and they're there for ZFG, they're there for you Golden, they're there for Spike, so that's going to be something that will likely pack the room more than something like Optus run last year at AGDQ would, because he's a very well known and popular speedrunner, but he's still fairly niche, whereas ZFG has a very wide reach.
right, and he's had an established presence online too. It's I think a lot of times too when you look at it, how often do they stream? How many years have they been streaming? Do they run the games that people are talking about? All of that kind of comes into play.
Yeah. ZFG is a very good way to kind of end the marathon because he is very well respected, not just within the community, but from just a broader perspective. So, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah, and you know, it pleases the people too who are fans of the longer finale. I know that a lot of people like to say, well, it's not a finale game unless it's a really long one. And I think that still fits the category. But at the same time, 100%'s come down a long ways from what it used to be. So it is for a 100% run. I guess you could say it's relatively quick.
Sure.
I guess there's. It's one way to look at it, but
I don't know. Test runner, are we going to see Skyward Sword 100% anytime soon?
Yeah.
I was about to
9-hour marathon right there.
That amazes me. It's only 9 hours, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, any other thoughts on Ocarina of Time as the finale?
There was a few things I wanted to comment. Like, first of all, I mean, the Zelda games, we had Twilight Princess and SGQ 2013, I think.
Correct.
Yeah, and that went pretty well. So having a Zelda End of Marathon is not too unusual, I guess. But now it's at AGQ, not SGQ. But also, we've usually had a Zelda games like usually like the second to last game in the marathon or something like that. So it's like right at the end. So kind of pushing it to the very last thing isn't out of the ballpark. And really, what stands out to me more than anything else is not that Ocarina of Time is the last game, but that Final Fantasy is not on those like last runners. It's not the second last game, and it's before Super Metroid. It's in the middle of the day, so that's kind of unusual and interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely very different. I also want to ask too, because I'm not actually very familiar, but are there donation incentives that can happen during 100%? Because this is something I was thinking about too. When I looked at the schedule, is there's always been kind of this mantra of like a game can't be a finale game unless it's got incentives. So it's interesting to me. Like there's like this light bulb going off in my head that maybe that isn't the case anymore. Like maybe a game can ride through on its popularity versus needing essential incentives like your file names and your character names and all of that can kind of persist through the run. I almost feel like maybe what's happening instead is, Ocarina of Time could just pull in that many more viewers, and then the donations could ride off of that instead of, needing a, I guess, quote unquote reason to donate.
Sure. And you've got the possibility, everyone gave Chrono Trigger crap last year that, it wasn't the game. It was just because we were close to $1 million. It's like, well, okay, if that's the case, maybe your finale game doesn't need that. Maybe it's just whatever that push you need in that last 5 hours. That's, okay, it's Ocarina of Time. It's going to bring in the viewers, and they're going to be willing to throw down for whatever the push is going to be. So I don't know. We'll put that to the test. We'll see what happens.
All right. We'll have a lot more to talk about with the schedule just a little bit later. But right now, I want to show you something. Assuming that the video works, we've been having some fun technical issues before the show. So cross your fingers. Here we go. It's time for the Clippy Clip. And what happened here? Well, a couple weeks ago, BJW was casually playing Secret of Mana and opened up a treasure chest, and all kinds of magic started happening. So instead of getting an item here from the treasure chest like he would have expected, he starts going through the memory of the game and creates an inn in the middle of the dungeon. And
what's happening, dude?
It's worth pointing out that this is a casual play, by the way. So he has
I don't think this is how the
no
game works.
rehearsed knowledge of the game. But what ends up happening as a result of this is that the task community jumps on it and tries to figure out, what can this be applied to. And so in just a minute here, once you kind of get to see the full effect, so there he is going into the inn, which he just created from that treasure chest. But basically, the dialogue in this game has opportunities for you to dismiss it. I believe it's like a one-frame trick where you can kind of dismiss the dialogue, and then it accesses other dialogues in the game.
Yeah, I'm not
so now the weird stuff starts happening. Here's the real-time application. We're looking at gameplay from Binary Nova, and this is now a 10-minute video game, ladies and gentlemen, done in real time. You'll notice here he's kind of skipping through all the dialogue very early on in the run, and he's going to trigger the end of the game. I believe the time on this is 8:49, if I'm not mistaken. So there it is. There's the end.
great final boss right there.
Yeah. What I love about this actually is that the same music plays. It doesn't roll the credits music or anything. It just like whatever your music was when you trigger the end credits, like it's still like the overworld theme just going. But
okay, two things. One, is this not the speedrunner's dream? Is this not the speedrunner's dream to just be like, oh sure, I'm just gonna, bam, broken video game. Just, I did it, I nailed it. I would brag about that for the rest of my life. That's a greater achievement than any world record we're ever gonna get. That's gonna be broken 3 weeks from now, and no one's gonna remember your name after that. This is the greatest achievement you could possibly have. You didn't even put time into it. You just played the video game.
Right. How many of us have been playing games for years and going like, if only I could find a trick in this game. Like, like I can't find anything useful in my own speed game, or you know, you're casual playing and nothing weird ever happens to you. It's just like perfectly normal. And the best part about this is that you know, BJW, good friends with Karua, and Karua is a big fan of this game, and so not only was he able to find this trick, but he was able to destroy Karua's game and make him agitated about that. So
greatest game swap ever.
Yeah. So really interesting, and of course now he's getting credited on the TAS. You know, they mention it in the description of what's going on there over on TAS video. So he's getting credit for that. And it's like kind of like you mentioned. You know, I didn't really do anything. I was just playing the game, but there you go. Now I'm a discoverer. You know.
It's funny. People always ask me like, how do the speedrunners find all these like crazy glitches like Ganondorf and stuff like that? It's like, well, it's interesting because like some people like glitch hunters like grind at the game trying to find all sorts of weird things that they can abuse. But it's like a large number of glitches are found like pure accident. Like someone just let's playing on YouTube. And it's like, what the heck just happened there?
Right.
And magically wrong warps the credits from there.
Yeah. So worth noting, by the way, that this is a completely separate category now from your standard Secret of Mana runs, which are, you know, over an hour long. That this has been quickly separated into its own thing just because of the broken level of it. But it is cool to see that people are doing it in real time. You know, it is something that is dependent on frame perfect tricks. So at first, you know, just getting to see the task was pretty cool, but then seeing other people going for it in real time and being able to do it, I think it's pretty interesting. It's definitely one of those runs that, you know, it's not going to have lasting appeal. It's not going to be something that you're going to, you know, go back to doing runs of for years of your life or anything like that. But it's cool. That's the only thing that matters. It's just
because I mean, Binary Nova's run is actually already less than a minute off the task, the new task that was made. So this is probably going to go the way of like A Link to the Past in %.
Yeah.
That you get the novelty of it out of the way, and then you're like, all right, I'm going to go back to my actual
It's one of those things that if it can ever get consistent enough to the point where someone can do it in a marathon setting, like that would be a cool inclusion as just like your non-standard showcase of it. You know, like have it be the full game at AGDQ and then bring it back at SGDQ and do something that people aren't expecting with it. You know, like how could you beat this game in 10 minutes? That doesn't make any sense. And then you get all the angry chatters too, like that's not beating the game.
That being said, I don't know, like, it's not like, okay, we're not going to talk enough about the HDQ schedule in this marathon, but I almost feel like when something like this happens, I've always been a believer, and other people agree with this, that HDQ is kind of a review of the year for speedrunning. Like, I want to see this somehow get slipped into the marathon. Sorry, whatever else has to kind of shove itself over.
Right.
We need 8 minutes of, just to hear the story as the game's being played of, so this random speedrunner's just playing the game, and then I don't know. I think it needs to be there, but I'm not making the schedule.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that. You know, it's a perfect opportunity. Obviously somebody who runs the category has got to be at HDQ. You know, that's kind of a requirement, but yeah, I think it kind of necessitates that. And you've kind of mentioned a few times before where it'd be cool to kind of have like a reserve bank of like, save 5 hours just in case something really cool happens we weren't expecting. But yeah, this is one of those really cool things. Hopefully it can make its way in, maybe like a bonus game or something. But
yeah,
cool. Good stuff there. And now we'll go ahead and get back to what you guys know we're excited about here.
This is now the final salt.
That's right. HDQ schedule. So I'm going to kind of change the format here. And, normally we have a structured, like, this is my question, this is my answer kind of thing. I want to kind of open it up to you guys in the call, as well as you guys in the chat. Just, like, what are some topics about the schedule you want to talk about? What's jumping out at you? What are some criticisms? What are some positive things that you're seeing? Give me your schedule do's and don'ts. I don't know.
I think the one thing we were kind of divided on, kind of in the early stages of the call was, is the schedule more backloaded than usual? I'm seeing a lot of Mario, Dark Souls, Minecraft, Metroid, Zelda, all within kind of like the last 24 to 36 hours. And while generally the schedule is backloaded, it feels like a majority of the known established runs that have a big popular presence are in that last 24 to 36 hours.
Yeah. No, I definitely see what you're saying. Like, if anything that like sticks out to me, it is odd, just like because you do have such a blocky schedule all over and we'll get into that more, I'm sure. You've got all your Mega Mans, all your first-person shooters, and then randomly it feels like, all right, Minecraft, Dark Souls 2, Final Fantasy 7, Super Metroid, Ocarina of Time, like all we're expecting to be these like huge money makers are all packed on the final day. If nothing else, like probably what sticks out to me backloaded wise, and this again connects back into just the blocks, is that I don't understand why Minish Cap, Link to the Past, and Majora's Mask are all on that second to last night, all back to back to back. And Mike and Rom are two different schedulers, but I don't understand why you would want all of these back to back. Rom's idea of having all the Zeldas broken up, because I understand like it is the same fan base inherently, but after 2 hours of Zelda, I feel like after we've seen one, it's like, okay, I'm not going to watch all the Lord of the Rings back to back on this day. I don't know, some people do, but I don't know, those being all back to back seems very odd to me.
Yeah, I want to hold off on that topic just a minute because I
sure.
will get back to it, but going back to what Supreme said about just in general backloading it, there's been some good points in the chat already that I kind of agree with. Some of the really big runs are happening at the very end, and that's good. I mean, obviously you want to have a big finale, but I almost feel like it might be more beneficial to bring in some of those bigger names early on and bring the viewers in early, because one of the things that any marathon kind of struggles with in the first day or two is just getting the news out there that, hey, this is going on. Even something like HDQ that's as big as it is, you're talking the difference of a couple thousand viewers maybe, but just what if you took like your Minecraft, for instance, that's got big name streamers, and you put that on day 1 instead of day 7 of the marathon,
sure.
And that brings in their audiences as well, who might otherwise not watch speedrunning, and from there you've got a big audience established on the first day, and they carry through the rest of the marathon. Or do you think that maybe day 1 schedule already has that? I guess looking at it from my perspective, I kind of think it could benefit from that a little bit.
I feel like it's already pretty, personally, I feel like it's pretty spread out. I mean, day 1's usually always pretty weak, but we have the task block, you have Battle Block Theater. Those are all going to be really popular. And like the second day, you have F-Zero. On the third day, you have Castlevania, and you have Super Mario World games. Like on the next day, let's see, we have the Mega Mans, we have Sonics, and Kirby. And then after that, the following day, we have all the big FPS games like Half-Life and Portal. And the day after that, we have the Zelda games, and then the finale. I think every day has like a big honcho that kind of really sets like something that you need to see that day. Like every day, there's something on every day that I'm gonna watch for sure.
Yeah, the thing to keep in perspective is that while the final day might seem like it's got a lot of big money makers, everything on this schedule is a big popular title. Otherwise, it's probably, with the exception of Awful Block, not going to make the schedule. So the day that's subjected to just Mega Man and Sonic games, again, you've got the F-Zeros building off of last year. Every day's got really, really, really popular stuff that's going to bring in tons of viewers. So I don't know. I don't feel as scared of this final day as I did SGDQ in relation to the rest of the marathon. And I think that's mainly just dealing with Mike had the ability to pick anything he wanted, and he had everything to pick from. He had so many good games.
And I do think that the way that the final day is structured, there is kind of a, we kind of mentioned a concern about Ocarina of Time, will people stick around in the room for that or not? But I do think some of the other games that are on that list are going to bring people into that room, in the morning hours, the afternoon hours. I think there will be a lot of people in there for the Yoshi's Island race that's going on there. I think Minecraft is going to be exceptionally popular. I think Super Metroid always brings in a lot of people, and putting that towards the end, we'll see how that goes. I'm curious to see how that plays out. And then the back-to-back, Runner Guy ZFG.
Yeah.
I think that's
the thing that stuck out to me was having Super Metroid there near the end is a very good move as far as getting people to stay in the room, or getting a bunch of people in the room at least at first. Because Super Metroid always draws a packed crowd, because within the community it's so well respected by almost everybody.
Yeah, I mean, it's got kind of an established history at this point. It's a marathon game, and some games just cater well to marathons. I think that's one that just strikes well at home and to the people that are at the event as well.
Is there anything though that hurts Super Metroid from the fact that it's almost impossible to follow up what happened last year? And Epic and Sweet Num, they're certainly not scrubs at the game. They're very solid at the games, but it's not necessarily Ivan and Zost. Does this have kind of a backlash from last year? Do we see that possibly happening from just we cannot possibly match what happened last year?
I guess the way that I look at it is it's new faces, it's fresh. It's not Zost every single time around, that kind of thing.
Sure.
When you look at like a sports analogy, I hate. No, I don't. I don't hate using sports analogies. I love sports analogies. Get out of here! Don't lie. So you always have like your number one seed that comes back every single year to the playoffs, and they're always doing well. What happens when Ferris State makes the finals, right? They're in the championship, and suddenly, like, I don't care about Ferris State. I can't even pinpoint them on a map, but I have an interest in that. I kind of think maybe there's a little bit of that here where, Epic and Sweet Num have the potential to show us something that we haven't seen just because they are different players. It's not going to be as formulaic, or something that it's not going to have to try to live up to expectations of previous Super Metroid races simply because it's not the same people.
Sure.
Whereas I think if you brought the same people back, then there is that expectation of, okay, well, I watched these guys play it last year. They better be just as good, or they better be better. And I also like that it's kind of a different format. Like people are expecting the 4-way Super Metroid race or the single player showcase of it, but it's a different format, different category. I think there's enough variety there.
I think it kind of depends on the community as far as, Epic and Sweet Num. Will people tune in? Super Metroid could be a game that doesn't really matter. I mean, I know that there was the time where Gary was the guy. It was Gary. Everybody loved watching Gary play the game. And then Zost kind of came in. I mean, he didn't come out of nowhere, but he just kind of rose in. There's communities that allow for this ebb and flow. Whereas, I remember, I think it was ZSR a year or two ago when Cosmo wasn't able to do Wind Waker and Crazy Insane stepped in. And that was a disaster for the first hour. Not the run, but just the chat going crazy over it's not Cosmo.
Sure.
So there's certain games that can lend itself to it. I think Super Metroid is one of those. So I think you're not going to see a big drop off.
And we've seen in other games too where someone steps in and does just as well as or puts on a really good show considering who they are. Like Peach is stepping in to do one-handed 16-star. That's a run where I think a lot of people would have jumped on the fact that, hey, it's not Siglemic, it's not Puncation, why am I watching this? But then you stick around for it, and Peaches knows what he's doing, and he's going to put on a good show for that, and it's going to impress you in a different way in a game where you already have an expectation. So I think there's potential for it. Let's talk about something else here, which I think, Spike, you were kind of getting at a little bit there when you mentioned the Zeldas. Sure. So maybe you can use that as your example, but just in general, what are your impressions on some of the blocks here, and do you agree with the way that they're laid out, or you know, what do you like about the blocks? What don't you like about the blocks? I guess we'll start with Spike since that's what he
Yeah,
was talking
well,
about.
I mean, with all the different specific blocks, my biggest issue, I mean, there are a bunch that stick out. Obviously, I think people can point out the Mega Man block, not blocks, block that is going on. We are going to get, you know, Mega Man Unlimited, Mega Man 157X, X3, Rockman X. You're going to get Shovel Knight before that. Like, I don't understand why all of a sudden we say we're going to have all the Mega Mans back to back. You know, you've got all 4 of the F-Zeros right next to each other. What has always been odd to me about blocks is it feels like, all right, well, let's make sure we don't trick people into coming back and looking at the marathon on other days where they might accidentally see other games that they didn't know about, and now all of a sudden, oh wait, I like this game too, because that can happen all the time. I think I feel like you're cutting off those opportunities. You're actually just telling people all you have to do is show up on this one day of the marathon, and you'll see the 3 games you want to watch, as opposed to spreading them out in any way. So. Yeah, Mega Man, F-Zero, those 2 definitely stick out to me in a big way. And the one I mentioned earlier, I don't see why you would put 3, you know, almost 2-hour Zelda games back to back to back, as opposed to spreading them out, considering they are so popular. They're going to bring in such a broad audience. And now through that, I can sprinkle out the viewing and see other games on either side of the game and maybe draw more of a fan base for those games.
All right, the Test Runner Supreme, what do you think?
No, I agree in a lot of ways. Usually when I watch games, there's like when I look at the schedule and I was like, all right, what games am I gonna watch? You know, everyone goes with problems of the games they're gonna see and usually fail to meet those. But I go in and usually I'll see the game before, like while waiting for the game after if it looks interesting when the game finishes. And when the games are spread out, there's a lot more games I might watch that I probably wouldn't have tried. In addition, when you have all the games together in one block, even if it's a series I'm a fan of, like if I'm just casual and like I just really like the Mega Man games. They're fun to watch. I played them as a kid or whatever. And I see like 10 Mega Mans back to back. I watched like 3 of them. It's like, okay, I've pretty much seen Mega Man now, and they're not going to watch the rest because it's all the same. So, I mean, I'm not trying to say Mega Man speed games are all the same. I just mean for the casual perspective.
Right, to an outside viewer, I mean, you're seeing kind of the same pattern of, all right, I'm playing through these 8 stages. I'm refighting these same 8 guys over and over again. It's a very pattern prone layout to the schedule, and viewers are kind of looking for more of maybe some variety to what they're seeing, I guess you could say. I like the idea of blocks. I think blocks I think blocks do need to be there. They make sense, but I think it's kind of a weird. I can't even really describe it, but there's something that makes a block work versus something that can make a block too big or too unnecessary. I think in the case of the Mega Man block, just having that many games in a row is a lot of the same, where there's potential to break them up based on what they are. You know, you could, like in other marathons, we've seen the X block and we've seen the classic Mega block, or the fan game Mega Man block. Just kind of splitting them up where they make sense, so that they're a little bit smaller. And then it brings people back on multiple days to watch those. I question some of the orders of some of these blocks. I think Mario Kart 8 is going to be a really popular run to watch, but I wonder how Mario Kart Wii will fare after 8. Simply because it is an older game. It's not new. It doesn't have that, wrapped copy hype. You know, you can smell how new Mario Kart 8 is. Go ahead. I like that there are some changes being made. I see Mike already making some changes in response to some of what people have said on the forums. I think the Donkey Kong block was broken up more just to accommodate the runners, but I think that was a good move too, because I question having a race that early in the marathon. I think that it's nice to see Donkey Kong Country 2 moved a little bit later to give those guys a chance to warm up and have some viewers for that
and actually just have the runners be there, because I know Krauser would not have been able to be there. I think Christmas said he wasn't going to be able to be there. So yeah, there was obviously some miscommunication or just not relayed to Mike at all there.
There's also the tech risk, having have a 4-way race right at the beginning of the marathon. It's like, well, hopefully it works and you have all your tech stuff working by then and there's no bugs.
But I guess I'm curious, and maybe the chat can fill me in on this too, because I've seen people say on the forums, they love their blocks and they want all the games grouped together. I guess from my perspective, if I'm watching a marathon, I'm not familiar with the runs. I like to kind of have more variety, and it's refreshing to me when I'm watching a marathon and I see, okay, we went from third person shooter game to 2D platformer to RPG, and it's just kind of like this this bouncing around, and then sometimes you get your block and it's an hour but it's 3 games, so it's a short block but they kind of all have something in common. What kind of things do you guys like? Do you really like that large block? Is anybody in the call gonna sit through all the Zeldas back to back to back, or is that something where you would have said, hey, let's split them up?
I probably would, but I'm extremely biased.
I would not. And I really like Zelda games, but that's, what is it, 5, 6, 7 hours at that point. Usually it's hard for me to just sit
You
around
need
for
a
that
bathroom
long.
break at some point.
Yeah, exactly. I think the blocks work really well for like classic Mega Man block, where they're 30, 40 minutes a piece. So you only get about 2 hours of game still in the total thing. And then I guess the thing I question, and I'm probably not going to make a fan of Naglaria here from what I'm reading, but like F-Zero, why are those all together? For someone like Naglaria who runs the games, these are all different, have different tech. But for me sitting at home knowing nothing about F-Zero, I'm watching a graphical progression of futuristic cars on a racetrack going around the circle. And the same goes for Mario Kart.
Right.
It's like you say, yes, we talk about, Naglaria is going to say in the chat, be like, all the Mega Man games are exactly the same. Well, no, they've all got their differences. The games have progression as you go through them, just like the F-Zeros do. And I understand, like, the F-Zeros, like, maybe they've got a lot of merit as speed games, but to the viewer at home who has not even played these games, or maybe play them but has no idea what the speed tech is, it's going to look like the same thing for far too long.
Right. And how easy is it for you to, as the home viewer, if you're looking at the schedule and you see a list of games that all have something in common and you're not a fan of it, you're gone. That's my viewership right there. I'm out. Whereas if it's maybe it's 1 or 2 games and you're like, well, I'm not so sure about that, but it's only an hour. Maybe you leave it up and you stick around. And I also question, people are saying, well, I'm a huge fan of the game, so give me that block. If you're a huge fan of the game, do you really need the block for you to show up, or are you going to show up anyway? I kind of, I question your fanhood there, your ESPN fanhood. It's a tough issue because as a scheduler, how do you decide like what deserves a block and what needs to be split up? But I do think, in a couple instances, it makes more sense. I think having one Zelda a night is good because it brings people back for Zelda, and all of them are going to be fine on their own. And I do wonder, for some of these blocks, the Mario block, here's another example. Mario games are incredibly popular, but are people really going to want to stick around for their 6th or 7th Mario in a row? Right. Or is it going to, hit them that, okay, well, we've really seen a lot of Mario tonight. Yeah, I just kind of, question some of the, I think length is kind of my biggest concern for some of these blocks, just how many games in a row is too many. But at the same time, I like a lot of the blocks that are on the schedule. Like, I know it's very easy to sound like, oh, Golden hates blocks, like never have blocks, always spread out your games. But I think Commander Keen is an example of a block that's really well done. Sure. You got 4, 5, 6. It takes 30 minutes. You're playing 3 different games, but you get to see the nuances between each one, and you're done. If you're not a fan of Commander Keen, that's 30 minutes, right? And then the next block starts up. And the Mario Kart block, other than the order, putting Wii after 8, I like the idea of kind of having a racing block, so to speak. I don't know that it necessarily needed to be like Mario Kart and then Mario Kart again.
There are just certain blocks of games that sell themselves better as blocks. That if people think to themselves, oh, if Sonic 1 was still in the marathon, I think Sonic 1, 2, 3 is a great block. People view it as, I can go back and relive that trilogy of my childhood. Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3 all together. I can relive that childhood. As opposed to, like, I don't know, 1, 5, 7, X, X3, Rockman X.
Right.
Like,
there's no connectedness anyway.
No, there's not. So why do they all have to be put together? Is it a bad thing to convince, like, a fan base to come back on a second night to find their games? I don't know. But now I'm going back to what I was saying. Yeah.
There's something else I want to point out is that a big reason why long games tend to be like very scrutinized when added to the schedule is the fact that they're a huge risk. When you have a very long period of the same game, there's a lot of risk involved. If it does well, it's great. If it doesn't, then, well, you just like put out 6 hours of the schedule into like a complete dump or something. But these blocks kind of almost seem like the same way in some ways, not exactly, but if you're putting a lot of games together in this block that you're kind of experimenting with, it's a big risk. You know, you don't know how it's going to turn out.
All of a sudden, it's like there's 10 games on the schedule, and they're each 6 hours long. Here's the Mega Man game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, this is the 6-hour Mega Man game, and it's like, does this game warrant a 6-hour Mega Man game kind of thing, you know?
Right. Yeah, and you know, there are some blocks on here that I really like, and I want to get back to that for just a minute. I like the idea of kind of having, you know, the Prime Zero Mission kind of thing, where it's, you know, two games that kind of complement each other a little bit. It wouldn't really make sense to, you know, separate Zero Mission and put it on its own day when they're so similar in I guess, theme, so to speak.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. Portal 1 and 2, again, another example of something where it's like, okay, that makes sense to put them back to back. They're short enough. They kind of flow with each other. But yeah, I don't really know. I guess I don't want to word it this way because it sounds awful, but the impression that I get when you like, and it's now I'm going to be the bad guy. When you just block games by like the category, I guess I question why it took more than 5 minutes to make the schedule, right? Like, I'm not trying to say that like you did a terrible job with the schedule. Like, don't get me wrong, but I'm serious. Like, if you're just gonna block the games by
sure.
This is an F-Zero game, put it next to all the other F-Zero games. There's not a whole lot going on there for me. I don't know. It seems like there could have been some more thought put into it, but I don't want to say like that's a bad schedule, like shame on you, but
yeah,
it kind of like, but to be honest, like you're saying, yeah, all the same games are together and it's the same format as what it's been in the past. Is like, yeah, once you have your final list of games, it feels like, okay, Banjo-Kazooie is always on day 1. We always have Sonic games leading into Mega Man games on either day 2 or 3. We always end the marathon on the big Zeldas, the big Super Metroids. Awful Block is already, you know, Graveyard Shift day 5. Like, all of this is pretty much in structure. You just have to fit the games into it.
I'm trying to think of a good example here, and this is maybe... I'll let you decide how good of an example this is, but a lot of times the trap that you can fall into, I think, when you're looking at blocks is that you look at the game that they're from, right? Like, they're all Metroid games, let's put them together. But I think SGDQ 2013 had a really good example of what I would call just like a block. They did Diddy Kong Racing, and then right afterwards did Crash Team Racing. These are two games that are not from the same series, but thematically they're very similar. So once you've seen Diddy Kong Racing, the style of the game is very similar in Crash Team Racing. But you're getting two totally different series. You're getting a Nintendo game followed by a Sony game, so you're getting different console representation. And so it's just different ways to think about your blocks. What if instead of it was an F-Zero block, what if it was your kart racing block or your racing block, and you had one game from 3 different series of racing games? Or what if you had a SNES block that didn't necessarily include all games from one series, but it was 3 SNES games in a row, something like that. I think there's different ways to think about a block than they're all from the same game, or all from the same series rather.
Right. Which brings me into another little talk, I guess. Just it's hard to segue. Okay. Another little thing I'd like to point out, just again, like not necessarily a block, kind of a series that I think a lot of people kind of share a similar love for just this list of games. All the PlayStation, all the inherently Sony games are all at but o'clock in the
like
morning.
Everyone.
Yeah, you're looking at all of a sudden, okay, and these are not like unpopular series. You got Spyro the Dragon, 3:55 in the morning. Crash Bandicoot 2, 5 in the morning. Jak 2 at 6:30 in the morning. Metal Gear Rising and Metal Gear Solid 2. You go to the next last day, we got Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2 Bid War. Yay, we finally got in. And we're at 4 in the morning. All right, sick. So all of a sudden, like all these, Nintendo is getting, and again, we know Nintendo has the biggest fan base. A lot of people show up to watch those. But is this a little imbalanced to anybody else, or am I the only one noticing this?
No, and it's not the first time I've heard it either.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of complaints. And pretty much anyone who's a fan of Sony is mad, obviously, about this because they're looking for the Sony games, and now they're all at like the worst possible time slot, and they might not be able to see all of them because they're not going to be awake.
They're going to be at worst
So
possible time slots. And some of it, one hidden factor I've always wondered is I don't know what our international audience is necessarily. And I don't know if maybe part of this is Mike thinking, well, PlayStation might be a more popular series overseas, so the European audience might be able to get a little more out of it if it's during our graveyard shift. But I've always felt like that's been a very underutilized scheduling technique. Is thinking, all right, what games, like, we're not just going to put the less popular games in the graveyard block. Let's put games that are going to appeal more to other time zones in certain blocks. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of with you on that. And I guess my concern is that I can't imagine that there isn't an audience for Sony games in the United States. So I would say that it's kind of weird that all of them kind of fall into that graveyard pattern. If I'm a fan of Sony games at all, I'm a little bit maybe bothered by that. But I do kind of wonder why we haven't pulled in, one or two games at the least to get some Sony representation in prime time for the U.S. I think, what was it? Last AGDQ was Jak and Daxter?
Yes, Bonesaw started off the marathon.
Kicked off the marathon with that, yeah. So it's kind of weird to go from, Jak and Daxter kicks off the marathon to, like, where are the Sony games? I'm sleeping. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I think unless there is just like a proven Sony audience outside of the States, I kind of wonder why they haven't been spread out a little bit better.
yeah, I mean, I understand some of those Sony games like Kingdom Hearts being very long and I guess in
Sure.
bite size, bit of the risk game. I can see him kind of wanting to put in the graveyard shift just for that, but a lot of the other Sony games, I'm a little surprised. And it's like, all right, sure.
okay, so I'll be a little
Like Spyro being in the middle of the night is probably like the ones Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, Jak, Metal Gear. Like you have all those games like which all seem like pretty popular Sony games, and they like you think you might maybe see them maybe not prime time, but kind of like Graveyard seems a little on the other end. I don't know.
Yeah, to reiterate about the Spyro and Crash, it's very interesting because a lot of the people our age kind of started that Sony Nintendo divide, and so a lot of people do have that same nostalgia for Donkey Kong Country. There's a good chunk of people that have that same nostalgia for Spyro or Crash. So it's very interesting that they got relegated to the graveyard.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't mean to like give an overarching theme because I don't want to end the discussion. But do you ever think that when we're talking about some of these schedule elements, and we're concerned about, okay, the Sony games get put all the way into the evening block, and they could have been otherwise, afternoon or morning or just more spread out in general. Do you ever think that sometimes there's overthinking going on where there's too much concern about we can only really, this Nintendo game has more priority? Do you think that for a lot of those like in-betweener games that aren't the Marios, the Zeldas, the Mega Mans, that it's a lot of overthinking and really it doesn't matter? You would be okay to put your Spyro in the afternoon and you wouldn't have to worry about it, or is this something that there's complicated math going on somewhere?
There's so many factors to think about. Spike brings up the whole, is it good for prime time in Europe? Is there a lot of European runners? Do we want to block all the games together? How many games from a series should get in? Are we having too much Zelda? So there's so many factors that come into play. I think overthinking can easily be a problem.
Well, I'm just wondering, like from a numbers game perspective, is the viewer count gonna fluctuate that much if you put, not even just like insert Sony game here, but like insert any game here in the afternoon? Like how much of it is us overthinking it too much because we've been in the community for so long,
Sure.
versus it really is going to have an impact. How obscure does the game have to be before the viewer count starts to plummet? Is kind of my question.
right.
It's a tough call because you look at the view counts like specific games and see like how they go up and down for like various games. It can be hard to like judge properly just because it's like, oh well, we go into this game and they get a huge viewer drop, so obviously this game at this time slot works really poorly. But then it's like, but then you look at the previous game. The previous game's like super big popular, like Minecraft or something, and so the viewer drop just because of the fact that you're going from a really really popular game to anything else.
Right.
And so it can be hard to judge, I guess, just because of that. And all your data comes biased.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, definitely the games around big games kind of have to face the facts, I guess you could say. There's going to be the big influx of viewers, and then there's the aftermath.
And I'll go ahead and just take 1 second to be, in 26 or whatever episodes we've done so far. I'm going to take one moment to be a little biased here, but just kind of point this out. Not necessarily just for Kingdom Hearts, but just games in general. It feels like, obviously, and knowing on my side, the person who's pitched Kingdom Hearts quite a bit, that it's in this kind of prove me slot. It's in this prove to me position that you belong in the GDQs, that you can make this money. And then you're putting it in a time slot, honestly, for failure. Is at that point, if you're going to give it the worst time slot in the entire marathon, why did you give it to it at all? Did the game not deserve a midnight time slot? Something still late at night, but something that maybe people will stick around for, act as if it has no fan base. And again, it sounds like it. I'm not just saying this for Kingdom Hearts, but any game that like fights to somehow slip into a marathon.
Well, so Thousand Year Door, I think, is another example that kind of got that same slot too.
Sure.
At SGDQ, that was a game where it was for a long time questioned, like, should this be in a marathon? Is it too long for a marathon? And then, it finally gets its chance, and it's kind of running the graveyard shift, so to speak. So, I mean, there are examples of that in marathons past too.
Right.
Where, it's a debut of a game, but it's also kind of shoved.
No one's gonna see it though.
Shoved
But
into late night. Yeah.
When I saw that was SGDQ that had TTYD, right? When I saw that schedule, the first thing I said to a group of people I'm in a Skype group with was, we're finally putting in TTYD for you guys, but never again. We're putting it in a position to not necessarily succeed, which I actually was kind of surprised. I wasn't able to watch the run because I had classes and stuff, but from everything I saw, just because of the, TTYD has the silly donation incentives like the Flavio and, Yoshi color and all that stuff, Yoshi name, file name, whatever it may be. It seemed to do pretty well donation-wise. I think a little better than was expected.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Mike's always had that argument that if a game truly has a fan base, they will show up and donate for it. So maybe this isn't as bad as what I'm trying to make it out to be. It just, I know we've also had that discussion that 4 to 8 in the morning is the worst time slot you can get. I just know we've definitely had that conversation before. So it feels like those games you are setting up for failure.
Yeah, and again, this kind of goes back to a little bit, we talked about the blocks, but I almost wonder if that could be alleviated just by chopping up some of these blocks, because, it really does kind of reserve your primetime slots. When you've got Minish Cap, A Link to the Past, Majora's Mask occupying, I think it's like 3 o'clock until almost, I can't do math, 9 o'clock, something like that. Yeah. It's that's a huge arc of time in a decent time slot that you might be able to otherwise slip in, a 2-hour game or a 3-hour game from a different series. So, but just by having these longer blocks, you're kind of reserving time in key areas for specific series, and then in other series, it's tough for them to kind of fit in somewhere in between. But let's go ahead and I guess just talk about games in general. Are there any games on here that maybe jump out at you as like this is the potential breakout marathon for this game, or like what's the game you're really excited about that gets its chance this time around?
Battle Block Theater. Done.
Battle Block Theater?
Yeah. That game. I'm super hyped for that. You have 2 awesome runners doing together who have amazing commentary, and then you have a really popular game, and the tech for that run is like really interesting to watch. And so I'm just really excited for that. I'm like really hoping that does really well in the marathon.
I've seen more than once Vooligin typing a Scapegoat 2 in the channel, but
yeah,
happens to also be the only one typing it. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of games on here that are getting their first chance. Mario Kart 8's the kind of predominant example. I don't know of another time have we had Wario Land 4?
Why does it feel like maybe years ago we might have had it?
It might have snuck in somewhere in
like
there.
Maybe Mike 89. I know he used to mess with the Wario Land series. Maybe he did it at some point. So the one I'm going to point out that I'm crossing my fingers, I really hope it's a big success, is the Ninja Gaiden Relay Race.
Oh, yeah.
I really want to see this just be like blow out of the water, like hypest point in the entire marathon. Because I want to see more of these type of things in the future. Because it is so different than what we're used to seeing. It's something that shows, I think, I feel like we, the speedrunning community, have so much fun, especially through Speedruns Live, having these races kind of out of nowhere, these kind of maybe off the wall races that still have ended up being like huge successes, very close, tight, technical races down the line, shows off how many people there are doing these races. And now, finally, I commend Mike and the committee for doing this. I really want to see Ninja Gaiden Relay Race be a big success.
Yeah, no,
considering the names you got, you possibly looking at what Duckfest, Sinister One, Ohan, Dexter. You got Gus Mancini in there. You've got a bunch of really great runners that are going to be a part of this.
Right.
So.
And this is one of those, marathon defining things where this is going to be an international competition. It's people who haven't had a chance to play at a GDQ before. It's kind of the notoriety of Ohan. Everybody kind of has an expectation of him going into the marathon, and it'd be cool to see how he plays in the relay format. But it's also just a new format and it's fresh. I like that. It's going to be something different. People have kind of talked about these relay races or, team races, so to speak, in the past, but getting to finally see one, I'm curious to see how it goes. And I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, I think if relay goes well, is what everyone hopes, is not only is this relay goes well, if it does well, then future relays are going to be a thing. And I think people are really curious of like what kind of things speedrunners are going to pull out. Some like really weird relay races that people never even thought of doing. Some chain of
I know in the past there's maybe it was just me that was saying, I could be the only person, but I thought there was discussion of like team races of games where you would hand the controller off every so often.
Oh, sure.
It
was you, but yes.
No. It probably was me. You'd have like your red team and your blue team, right? And you do 30 stars and the next guy does 30 stars. I know I've seen these races on SRL before, where like they'll kind of play a portion of the game and then pass off to the next player. I think there's maybe potential for that in the future as well. Just with how many people are picking up some of the bigger games, it gives more people an opportunity to play. It's different. It's exciting. You're rooting for one team or the other.
I think it also has an effect. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, this never happened at GDQ, but it kind of reminds me of having those team bingos, if you remember those. Like you have a giant bingo card, and like between you and your teammate, you can like get the goals. Like you don't both need to complete the goals, just like between the two of you. So it's really interesting routing because of that. But something like that won't really happen because you need to have a bingo first, and you have yet to get that in.
Right.
Yeah, with the recent Donkey Festival we had, which was a big 3 or 2 day thing to look at or to do a bunch of DKC 1 categories in 2 and 3, we actually did a team relay for all 3 games. Where I did the one for 3, and it was like one person will do Worlds 1, 2, and 3. Person 2 will do 4 and 5, and then 6 and 7. And I think this would be something actually interesting to see at a GDQ because even online, it wasn't that difficult to coordinate. Just have an IRC channel open, be paying attention, and then when you see the words go, you run with it.
Right, yeah. And I think it's also kind of a more relaxed setting, and it's just more laid back as far as a lot of times. Because you're trying to take your run so seriously and you're focusing on it, you're putting all this time into practice, and there's kind of like a tension in the room on a lot of these runs because there's just an expectation of you play really well. And I think just by doing a relay race, that kind of loosens it up a little bit and it makes it a little bit more about the team element of it versus there's not so much individual pressure on one person. There's more of a dynamic with who do you root for, what team do you root for. You're not just rooting for an individual person anymore. Players who aren't at the top tier of a game can still contribute to their team, assuming the teams are well balanced. You could have somebody who's maybe not as experienced on a team, but they still get a chance to play in a marathon.
Right.
I like that. I think it's a really interesting element we haven't seen. So hopefully Ninja Gaiden kind of sets the tone for that.
For sure. I think this has potential to set the tone for a lot of great new things to go down at AGDQs in the future.
I guess another question I have, Test Runner, you probably have a thing or two to say about this, but looking at the schedule anything that strikes you as challenging for the tech side of things? Is there I mean, we talk about.
Obviously, the four-way races.
We can talk about like all the like dream sequences that we have for the schedule, but obviously tech plays a role too. So, what's striking you as the challenging parts here?
All right. Well, okay. There's a lot of four-way races, and we can talk about it a little bit more later. Whether you guys how you feel about that number, but I think some of the things that stood out to me in terms of like scheduling risk, the one that stood out, like there wasn't that much on here that really stood out to being like, oh, this is new, there's some weird tech thing going on. The main thing that showed up earlier was the DKC2 race right off the start, but that got moved, so I'm not really worried. I mean, the biggest things would be you have the task demonstration, which we've done a few times, so we can do it again. Like that's the thing. Like most in terms of tech, most of the stuff we've already done. I think the scariest things are probably like you have a couple really long PC blocks. This is probably like some of the longest PC blocks in terms of number of games we've had in a while. And based on how SGQ went, we handled the PC blocks really, really well, with the exception of a couple games. So maybe that was a sign to Mike saying that, oh, we can handle the PC games and like this is going to work. We can do it and just go for it. And so maybe that's just that. So maybe I'm just being paranoid, as I always am. And the last thing that really stood out, it's not so much tech, would be just the rogue block, just because rogue blocks are inherently very risky just by themselves in a marathon, and then you have all four of them back to back, and it's just like, well, we might just lose an hour there in the marathon, or just,
or gain an hour,
right,
or gain an hour. Yeah. I don't know. It's that block scares me, but that's not so much tech. It's more of the runs themselves.
Yeah, four-way races, I guess that's worth bringing up then too. You know, I'm looking through, just scrolling around and seeing the number of times that it says four-way race next to a game is more than it's ever been.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Super Castlevania 4, I think it's
Super Castlevania 4, Super Mario World, Mega Man X, and GoldenEye. 5 four-way races.
Yeah,
so Symphony of the Night. I think Symphony of the Night's looking to be in a four-way race.
Oh, is it? Oh gosh.
Odin, DKC2. There's a lot of them.
And there are a lot of games that also don't say four-way race at the moment, but they do say this person and maybe others. So there's the potential of maybe 2 or 3 or 4 players.
Yeah.
So
I think there's a list. I think I counted. I think it was like 29 races total in the whole schedule, and potential races.
That's a lot of races.
Yeah,
that's a lot of races.
Yeah,
and is that okay? We keep debating about races. Purely to the viewer at home, are races a good or a bad idea? I hate to make it that black and white.
Yes, no. There's no in between.
Good.
I think again, it all comes back to this blocking of the games and stuff. That's a great way to break up a block or to keep a block going longer than it should. Is let's say we've got 4 Mega Man games in a row. How do you make that interesting once you hit the 3rd or the 4th Mega Man? Throw a race in there, and it mixes that. There's a new element in there. It mixes it up. It's no longer about what is present in the game. There's the external factor of who do I root for, or oh, that player made a mistake. That's rough. It's not so much about, okay, it's another Mega Man game. I mean, obviously that's still there, but you kind of get that break in the action, I guess, for a different element. So I like them. I think I'm a big fan of the races at the marathons. Those are usually what you end up talking about too.
I'm scared.
That being said,
I
I do feel bad for the tech people, but
to be fair, like the new tech setup, we say it's every marathon model. You have this new tech setup and it can handle like this stuff and everything's gonna be amazing. And of course, it goes horribly wrong. But supposedly this new tech setup, like these races won't be too hard and everything will be pretty much smooth. But I mean, you laugh because it's never that way.
We're gonna record that 7-second statement there by Test Runner. Put that.
I just like
put that as a disclaimer.
My hand on it or something.
There's gonna be a lot of stuff taken from the show. We're gonna have me with Unique and Different on Ocarina of Time. We're gonna have Test Runner with this tech setup is gonna work.
Good stuff, dude. Good episode.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
I mean, I think in terms of from a non-tech setup, the main concern about races for me is just commentary. When you have a 2-way race usually isn't so much concern, but when you have a 4-way race, there's usually not a lot of room for people to talk, and it's usually kind of hard for the viewer to follow what they should be watching, with the exception of the Super Metroid 4-way race, which had this like own special commentary set up where we had Golden Sin on the side in the commentary, like some sort of sports, esports thing or something. And I thought that worked really well for a 4-way, but I don't know if they plan on doing that for this because they didn't do it the Mega Man. So I don't know.
That comes down to what runners you have. I mean, Golden has a pretty good knowledge of Super Metroid. DKC2, for instance, I know just from looking at the list, there's like 7 runners going, and if 4 of them are there, you can have 2 of them sit there and do commentary and do a good job. But, I don't know how many people for Stoughton are going to be there, but like, let's say it's just 4 and you want it to be a 4-way race. Then you don't have that ability. You don't have those people that are on the sidelines and can still provide commentary that's spot on.
Yeah, I think go ahead.
To once again go back to, I always cite our Rayman Legends race at SGDQ. The mistake to me was not that it was a 3-way race. It was that we did not allow someone to just purely do commentary. Because other than the 3 of us there, no one knew the game inside and out. And really, one of us needed to be an adult about it and step back and say, I am going to give you play-by-play commentary, you the viewer commentary, so you can actually appreciate what's going on the screen.
Right. And there's kind of this element of it's got to be it kind of falls on the community. How do you want to present your game?
Right.
Where I don't expect every single race to have this NBC coverage. From all angles, with multiple replays, and you don't need that for every single race to work well. Sometimes it's one person on the couch who's knowledgeable in the game, and the game is simple enough that they can relay that to you just between stages, that kind of thing. Other times, it necessitates it or could benefit from having that outside commentary where you've got 1 or 2 people who have practiced before the marathon starts. For 4-way races especially, I think that's hard for a viewer to figure out, if I tune in 5 minutes into the race and I don't know the game, who's winning? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah. Somebody already made a mistake and I have no idea. Maybe they're in the lead, maybe they're way behind. So yeah, I mean, I guess to some extent, if you want your game to be that, then you kind of have to find somebody within the community who wants to be a part of that. And we got to see that a little bit at SGDQ with Mega Man X2, getting some outside commentary there.
Yeah, it kind of makes a reference to the Batman race where you just have 2 runners. It's so intense and it's really close, high tech game. And they're just going at it, and it's this intense race, but not a single word spoken. There's no commentary at all.
Right.
It's that other extreme. Like, is that good? Do you want to have the intense races are close with no commentary? You want to be a little more lighthearted with lots of commentary. It's the 2 extremes.
It probably barely worked. For a game that was seeing its 3rd appearance in a GDQ, was an 11-minute game of runners that were relatively established at that point. It barely worked. So yeah, anything beyond that, you need someone to guide people through it. There's a reason why scoreboards are on the screen for television these days.
Go. Yeah.
So.
All right. So outside of 4-way races, I think. Let's see. Other topics that are trying to come to mind, just to see if there's anything else. Did you guys have anything else?
We finally got our 10 games that were cut. Obviously, with the release.
That is true.
I want to know what you guys think, because I personally have just a little bias axe to grind here. And the very first game on that list is a scenario that I was worried about just in general. ECAST is from another country. And here he is now less than 3 months away, and all of a sudden his game's not in anymore.
Right.
He's a personal favorite streamer of mine, so it really sucked to see that cut. And I know it really sucks for him because he's put time into the game. He's been sitting here waiting. He made it past, as I heard last week, that second round where you generally think you're safe. And now here he is in the 4th round, finally cut. Now what?
I guess this is something else that Spike and I were talking about. I don't remember if it was this week or a couple weeks ago, but just this uncertainty of, should I book my flight? And it's really unfortunate that there were these kind of last minute cuts made that had that kind of impact.
It just sadly gives this sense, and Testrunner and I both joked about it when we were putting together our predictions list a month or two ago, and that it really felt like Mike did not factor for all the setup time that was needed for all the different games, that he put up a 153-hour schedule that ended up being cut to like 133 hours when you remove setup. So 20 hours worth of games that thought they were going to be a part of the marathon after round 2 all of a sudden were not. That's not like we had to trim a little bit here and there. That's a huge section of games that all of a sudden had to get cut off. And yeah, some of us, it's disappointing. Other people, they spent money. They have spent money, and I hope in the future this, it's a different way they handled the scheduling this time around. I hope we're able to hold on to this and do better with scheduling in the future, because that is very frustrating, I think, for anyone who just now found out, oh, for the last few weeks, I was certain I was going to be going to AGDQ and having my game.
Yeah, and this is one of those things we mentioned a long, long time ago on the show where we said, we were saying that when people were submitting games to marathons, they didn't have enough time to submit them, right? It was, you had to get your games in like right after the previous marathon. And so there was kind of this expectation that, okay, we've got this many months in advance where we're submitting and kind of signing on board. And now it's kind of weird where there's just like this extra gap of I submitted my game this many months ago and I'm still in limbo. I'm not sure, I haven't got a yes or no.
Well, part of the problem is that we started submissions so late because people in Europe and other places asked to push the submissions back later. Like they pushed it back almost a whole month. Mm-hmm. So you're gonna know if your game's in or not a month later. So that's like the double-edged sword. It's like you want us to do late submissions, then you're not going to know.
Right. But the problem here is just not being clear cut about it. Is that even when we asked Mike, so are we going to find out about these? People still had to wait for this BS process. They had to wait until the schedule was actually posted, as opposed to these games. I think were pretty well cut in Mike's head. That all right, these are not going to be a part of them. At least let them know. There is a 98% chance you are not going to be on the final schedule. And also being more transparent with all of these cuts, we had the initial wait list. We now have had 20 more hours of cuts. What is the actual wait list? And what does it actually mean at this point? Is it, if this, and this happens, then you might have to play your game at the marathon. So be ready to play it. As someone, who had a game on the bubble that got cut, Rayman, should I be playing it for the next few months just in case? Or is my game no longer on the wait list? Same for all these people that just got cut. Should Shadow Draft be ready to go with Electronic Superjoy? And if we do get it, am I going to get punished like Garrison did for Bucky O'Hare and say, now you're not going to get it at the next marathon? What exactly is going on with the wait list?
No. And so I guess I have to clarify because I didn't word it the way I wanted to, but so the difference for the scheduling, people wanted it more time after a previous marathon to kind of think about what games they wanted to submit. But I think the problem here wasn't so much like, okay, we didn't get that time. Like we certainly had plenty of time to submit for this AGDQ. I think more than any marathon before that I can think of. The scheduling was just kind of open and people had time to submit those games. But I guess the question was, after going through round 1 of cuts and round 2 of cuts, there was kind of an uncertainty of when is it, what is the final round of cuts? How do I know for sure if I'm in or not? And so whether or not those cuts needed to happen sooner, it just kind of left people in a limbo where, okay, well, for international people, they've got to be making these decisions now. They can't wait until a week before the event to start planning because, you've got to start factoring in your flight, your passport.
To raise money for Japanese runners. Like, what if those Japanese runners, all their games got cut? It's like, well,
right.
Just like the marathon.
Now we've got this money just like floating here. Like, what do we do with it? Yeah, exactly. So, I think don't confuse me or don't confuse what I'm saying by saying we should submit games earlier and have less time to submit. No, I like the idea of having a longer submission time, but those cuts have to be more clear in the future, I guess, and more immediate.
Cuts need to be more clear cut.
Yeah.
This is here, this is your position, this is your position. And as long as everyone knows, all right, that's the position I'm in, we can work with this.
Right. And I guess now my other question is, knowing what happened to SGDQ, is this going to be another example where, okay, we've cut a bunch of games now, and then we get to HDQ and we're going around, knocking on people's hotel rooms. Hey, what games can you offer? We're 5 hours ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
So some of those last minute cuts, that I guess that's maybe the position they're in. I don't know. Is that if you were cut most recently, is that where you're sitting?
Yeah, maybe, maybe not. I've got the feeling that's not how Mike wants it to sit. That you've maybe got certain games that you want to put in. Maybe it depends on which games get cut all of a sudden. Well, we want a similar game. If one of the Mega Mans get cut, maybe you want another Mega Man. I don't know, probably not. But you understand what I'm saying. So,
yeah, and there's gonna be a lot of drops also. That's like always happens.
Yeah.
You're not gonna have all these games. Like some runners are like, I can't make it or thing, and they have to start filling in with some other games all of a sudden. And a lot of times these recent drops get put back on. I'm not saying that you should hope that your game gets back on because someone's gonna drop, because it's not necessarily gonna happen. But I don't know. There's always an unknown. Even on like when the marathon starts, like on like marathon day, there's always this like unknown that you're like, there's gonna be some part of the schedule that changes.
who knows?
All right. On that note, I think we've made it through quite a bit of stuff here. So let's go ahead and finish out the show with the segments that we have, and then we'll open it up to chat Q&A to maybe see what you guys are thinking about in the chat. But for now, let's go ahead and look at a record of the week. And I'm going to ask for help on this one, otherwise the video is just going to play. I am not particularly knowledgeable, but we've got Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg. I know this is one Spike wanted to see.
Great game.
All right, so we're going to let the video clip play and not say anything. Good. That's
No.
what I want.
That's what's...
So,
I can't say personally I know a lot about the tech of this game. I just know it's obviously super popular game within the community. I believe this is Ion who now has their... Oh, no, Liquid Squid.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, just, great game with a lot of cool movement tech. Kind of a cult popularity. But finally got it showing at SGDQ. And I know Golden and I were just very happy to go ahead and show off a game that's pretty different. We haven't featured this sort of game on the show yet. So, pretty cool.
I mean, obviously, I'm the first to admit I don't know a lot about this game, but I have seen it in the past. I know there's kind of I don't want to say cult following, but I guess that's kind of what it is in a sense. It's one of those GameCube games that you've either played or haven't seen, but I think it's one of those games that definitely in a marathon setting could see some sort of fan base kind of build around it or show up for it.
I think my favorite thing about watching Billy Hatcher runs, and I've noticed this, I've got several friends in the community that run this. It's just like you see there, just gates are almost completely useless in this game. They're like walls and donk around them. You just go around them. You can bounce off of things to get over them. It doesn't even really matter. They just get around the gates.
Those are my favorite sequence breaks in any game, where it doesn't look like there's this crazy setup or anything. It's just jump. It's just
right.
The most mundane looking little thing.
No, and I love games like that where it's just it's straightforward. Like we're gonna move really quickly from room to room. It's not a lot of I don't want to say like outside knowledge, but I can't think of the phrase I'm looking for. Like it's a very immediate when you're looking at the screen what's going on, and it's a series that I think doesn't have that kind of representation that some others have. So. A cool run nonetheless. I wish I knew more about it so that I could give better commentary on it. But nonetheless, we've got the link there for you.
Either way, it's something very different. It's something you probably haven't been exposed to in a lot of the speedrunning world. Like, go check it out. Big shout outs to Liquid X Squid's run. We don't know what to say too much about it, but obviously it's a game with competition. So
yeah. I like you mentioned, I think Ion, I don't know if he's playing it at the moment, but I know he played it in the past quite a bit. So yeah, an interesting run. And from a game that we don't know a lot about it to a game that hopefully I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself on this one, Spike.
You got it.
It's Glitch Please, and I think you know this game,
Oh.
and probably the runner even too.
Yeah. So okay, I'm gonna cheat on this one. Okay. Yeah, I could explain it, but yeah, he's trying to make it up this long vertical shaft. I'm gonna let it speak for itself. Honestly.
Yeah, no, it's just jump on the enemy. Just don't hit the enemy. No, no. Just climb. Just get up there.
Okay, we're good. We've
One
reached the end. He's
one
gonna hit
platform
this
at a
little
time.
finished barrel at the end. Oh, he's gotta grab the what? What?
Where's he
No,
going?
no, you what?
Barrel's up there. That's it. That's unfortunate. That's a bad sequence of events. You have days like that sometimes.
Shout
That
outs
hand
to
mode.
Not So Newbie, one of our favorite community members.
That's
That's pretty unique gameplay. It was like he found every possible thing he could have screwed up there.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, how do you go from okay, I just barely missed jumping on the guy to I jump up and smack the guy in the face, and then there's a platform over here. Let me jump on it. Oh no, I'm way over. Like
Oh,
he
whoops.
put on the super jump boots there, and he was all over the
I
screen.
like something Claude said today during his DKC2 run. DKC series is it's momentum based. Once you make a mistake, it just piles up fast.
Right.
Your momentum's too much sometimes. So thanks again for the submission, and a reminder, since our inbox is getting very hungry, that you guys should feed it with submissions, which you can do by sending your clips to, there we go, Test Runner even getting in on the pointing action. He's prepared. finalsplit@gmail.com, and of course you can follow us on all of these other social medias as well. I know we haven't actually uploaded our last couple episodes, so I'll get on that this week to try to catch up to where we are at, but our YouTube's got all of our previous episodes there. But yeah, so get those clips submitted for us, whether they are good plays or bad plays or anything in between. If you think it's worth showing on the show, let us know. And with that in mind, let's go ahead and move on to Q&A with the chat. Probably going to be schedule related, but we'll see. It's time for the boss rush.
Is there anything non-schedule related that
Does
anyone
anyone
has
have
questions
any
about?
other, do you want to talk about the football games this weekend?
Yeah, so fantasy
Yeah,
advice.
I need
you know.
fantasy advice. My team's terrible.
All right,
this
I have
year.
a question. Since a lot of you guys have organized marathons in the past, in terms of organizing marathons, what do you think is the most challenging part, particularly like for online marathons?
Yeesh.
Getting volunteers to do the restreaming work was very difficult.
Sure.
Yeah, I think part of the problem, and I've noticed this not just with myself, but with other people who organize, is that a lot of us that organize love the sense of control that we have, where it's, like I can make this happen. I know I can do it. I just need to kind of, put all the pieces together. But the problem is that sometimes we think we can do more than we can do.
Yeah.
I ran into that in JRTA, where I felt like I had really good control over what was going on, and then things started to get a little bit more demanding than I expected. So there's this balance you kind of have to strike of I like to have the control, but at the same time I know that I need help with other people, and it was an experience to try and make sure that everybody that was coming on board was still kind of on the same page. And
Right.
it's different. It's challenging, and it's definitely humbling too. Where it's very easy for us to do the show and say like, "Shame on you, the schedule isn't exactly the way I want it."
Sure.
But at the same time, it's set in a loving way, and
We still love it. Yeah,
right,
sure.
right, yeah. I wish the schedule was a little different, but so does everybody. I mean, that's a natural thing. Like, you're not going to please everybody when you make a schedule. Even the JRTA schedule that we made, there were people inside our group that weren't happy with this game getting in or that game being out, that kind of thing. So you just kind of learn to accept it, and it's a fact. So that's the way I'm going to put it. Supreme, what
Yeah.
did you learn?
I
What
think for
did
me, the hardest thing was getting
Supreme.
communication with runners, like talking to so many people, and like I don't know, there's a lot of people, and they were less cooperative in communication than they said they were going to be, and it's kind of like when are you available? I need to put the schedule together, and people are non-responsive, and that was really frustrating.
Supreme,
Sure.
it's your
Sorry
Um,
about
What do you
that. Yeah.
think?
Well, I think what I learned was you got to get people involved a lot earlier than I did. Granted, I had a little bit of a very constricted time schedule due to certain circumstances, but you got to find a group of people, like just 2 or 3 people that you know are going to do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. Get them and let them be your main lieutenants that you can delegate things to if you need to. And that way, I'm not sitting there scattered, checking on 800 different people because I'm not sure if certain people are going to respond fast enough or if I'm going to get a response at all. So just have a small group of people that you're going to be willing to delegate to because you really can't do it all yourself, and it helps to have like a schedule, like a lieutenant or a restreaming lieutenant, someone that organizes the restreamers and gets all that set up. And for this we had like 1 or 2 people that were there to help, but it wasn't quite enough.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely, the other thing too is just finding people who you can rely on to, kind of stick with it the whole way. It's very easy for somebody to sign on board really early on. It's like runners especially, it's a good example, but people in the background who are helping with streaming and stuff too, making sure that commitment is real. And that they want to, see the marathon through just as much as you do is a challenging thing. But yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of fun. Wouldn't do it if, it wasn't worth the end result or something like that. So it was an experience, a learning experience. I see we've got like a mini campaign going on in the chat for Vanquish.
Good job, TRTA.
I got to admit too, that was a night I was planning to get more sleep than I did, and I ended up watching all of Vanquish while I was trying to go to sleep. So yeah, that was a good run. I had a lot of fun watching that one.
Nice. Did Mike make a mistake from Golden's mouth right here?
I don't know. I don't want to be that guy. That's
all right. But it's a good run. It's a good run.
Yeah, I know. It's a lot of fun. So, questions. Let's see. Did people actually ask questions, or are we just
was it all campaigns?
Someone said there's 7 people accepted for the SMW race. How will Mike pick who races?
4 best times.
Deathmatch.
Deathmatch. Who makes
that would be the more fun option to watch.
Oh, well, it's going to be if it's Mike picking, it's going to be Fighting Masters.
Oh,
I guess the one thing I'm interested in.
Completely unrelated.
Winning, you're in, guys.
I'm gonna potentially expose myself for somewhat controversial, but Seth Bling is one of those runners, a very, very famous YouTuber. If he is 5th place, does he bump somebody, or do you strictly go like 4 best times?
You're talking just because of his popularity?
Yes.
See, I think that's always a touchy subject, because I mean that kind of gets into the whole the Minecraft thing. Should that really be in, or is it riding the popularity, or should Wind Waker really get in every time if it's Cosmo just because it's his popularity, or Siglemic, Mario, that kind of thing. It's a touchy, it's murky water. And I don't want to get my clothes dirty. I don't know.
Right. It's at the end of the day, I would like to see more people just figure this out in a playoff-like system, kind of like we're doing with Tropical Freeze. But that's ultimately up to the community. It would be nice to see Mike come out with some sort of concrete, like, all right, here are your options. Here are ways to figure it out, because it's hard. He's always said it, but it's hard to not just say, here are the 4 people with the best PBs. I'm just going to go with this.
Right. And ultimately, like, whatever the decision is, I hope that it's a speedrunning motivated decision. Like, it's very easy for you to fall into the trap of this person will bring in the viewers, so let's go with that. And based on some of the decisions we're seeing lately from the GDQs, it does seem like that is kind of a driving factor for what gets in or how decisions get made. But at the heart of it, hopefully the speedrunning element and the competition element of it takes priority. Whoever the case might be, if Seth Bling ends up having one of those top 4 times, then that's just like a double bonus, right? Because then he gets his popularity in, and he's in the competition. But just to use that as an example, I guess I would say I always would prefer it to take kind of the speedrunning or more competitive side to it. Kind of like whoever deserves it gets the chance, or whoever the community, within the community too. Maybe there's a certain feeling about who should get the chance to play.
And I certainly don't mean to take a shot at Seth Bling or anything. He is actually very, very good at Super Mario World, but he is also much more well known for his Minecraft popularity.
Sure.
There's also the ideal where if a worse, more popular runner tends to be more popular because of their commentary, and so you would like that runner would go anyways and give some superb couch commentary even if they're not doing the run.
That's definitely true too.
I just think a forum post needs to be made by Mike to reach out to all the different communities of all these different games and just say, what do you genuinely think as a community is the best way to represent your game?
Right. Because
who are the 4 runners, the 2 runners, the 3 runners who should be doing it? Who do you need on commentary?
Right.
Whatever it is. And hopefully most of these communities are in a close enough, they're cool enough with each other where they can work that out.
Right, because
that's
while we are
not
in
the case for all of them. Go ahead.
While we are in this situation, we said, okay, now the cuts are finally done, and we kind of criticized that for there were still people not sure about what they're going to do. There are still people who are waiting for that cut because their game is on the schedule, but their name is not on the schedule, and so they're waiting to find out. Am I going to sneak in somehow or am I out? In that regard, I hope that there is kind of an initiative to figure that out within the next few weeks or something, just because it's an uncertainty for people. The game's on there, but it's not definitive. Your name's not locked in.
Right.
I saw other questions, and now people are getting into a heated debate, so I'm going to leave that alone and try to find the questions. What do you guys think of last AGDQ? Some developers of games came in for a call for interesting facts. Oh, I assume you're talking about like developer interviews during runs.
Sure. How do we feel about these? I think it has the potential to be really interesting. The problem is they're almost never rehearsed. Again, people always talk about how good Super Metroid commentary was. That was very, very rehearsed by Golden and Sinister. Like, you guys were meeting once a week and doing commentary for races. I'd like to see it happen for plenty of games. Like, you can get a developer in there, that's great. But the runner themselves in particular has a million other things that they're thinking about in the course of the run. And now all that commentary and everything you had going in your head is now thrown for a loop because now there's a developer in there. How am I supposed to balance how much I'm going to let them talk? What do I need to explain? Are we always stepping on each other's toes? Handling good marathon commentary is hard enough as it is, and throwing in developer commentary is a whole nother curveball. Because any developer, any artist at their craft can go on talking about that sort of stuff for days if you let them. So I don't know if I'm a personal fan of it if it can't be in some way rehearsed.
There's a couple of things I wanted to point out about that too. Is first of all, I think if it kind of goes back to races, like if it's a kind of game that doesn't need a lot of speedrunning commentary, I think adding in the developer commentary doesn't really take away from anything. But when you need to explain like every little glitch that's going on, then the developer commentary just kind of like makes the game impossible to watch. And I think the other thing is a common problem with developer commentaries is that they have to watch the Twitch stream, which is like 20 seconds delayed. And at SGQ, there's supposed to be a solution to that. We had a second machine to give them like a live feed and so on and so forth. But of course it broke, so that didn't work. But ideally that would be up and running at AGDQ.
Right. And I think another question too is, how notable does the developer need to be for it to be an interview that's going to interest people too? If it's maybe one of the more obscure titles on the screen at any given point, is that a valued interview? I guess it kind of, the question I have is, like you compare something like a Grant Kirkhope Skype call to random indie developer makes first game interview. Do you value both of them, or do you put the priority on somebody who's a known name that people are gonna want to hear the thoughts of just because they're somebody that they already admire? I don't know. It seems like I guess what I'm trying to say is like overuse of it could be a potentially like not a good thing. You kind of got to pick your spots for it.
And it's just two different versions. Like each of these artists, the runner and all the commentators and the developer themselves, they're looking through the game. They're looking at the game through different lenses. So not always does that match up very well when you're presenting it. It's okay, yeah, you went through this in making the game. That's not really what we're focusing on right now. And that's not necessarily what's interesting us right now. I'm telling you about speed tech, how to move through the game quickly, and not always can developers bounce off that very well. Some developers could, sure, but I don't know. It's a risky thing without a doubt.
Yeah, reminds me of Super Meat Boy when they like at end the level of like the final stage, they like jump off the edge and do a sequence break, and the developer's like, "Yeah, we intended that," and like that kind of commentary is awesome to hear. It's like,
Yeah,
"Yeah,
sure.
we intended that sequence break." Like that's what you want to hear when you have dev commentators. But I've had most of the dev commentators you've had on are usually like artists or like story writers that don't really know very much about the programming aspect and don't really add too much in like the speedrunning developer perspective.
Yeah, a lot of times it's interesting too. Like you'll have the developer on for commentary, and they've never seen the speed run before, so they don't know what's going to happen. Like they're not prepared for it either, and that can either be a good thing or a bad thing too. Like if they're surprised by it, I guess it's a good thing, um, or if they can at least like provide insight as to like why that happens or why it might happen. All right, we've got the final question here from our good pal Naglaria, who would like to know, do you think any of the F-Zero games in HDQ look similar? If so, what about them? I'll be honest with you, okay? As somebody who doesn't play a lot of F-Zero, I am concerned that putting that many F-Zeros in a row might drag on. And I'm not saying that to say, like, dang you F-Zero for getting 4 games in. I do think that it's cool to see that many different games in, because again, if you just pick GX every year or something, you're kind of falling into this repetition. So it's good to see that there is some variety there. But I do seriously wonder if it would be more beneficial to split it up and do kind of like a 2 and 2 as opposed to all 4 back to back.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I have no problem with all 4. Well, I'm okay. I'm okay with all 4 being in. More so just to give opportunities to the non-GX games being into the marathon. Even though 3 of these 4 were at AGDQ last year, it's more so just thinking like there's enough of a worry for the casual viewer watching any of these. Just an hour and 10 minutes of, I know what you can say to defend them, and like they've got all this cool speed tech and everything to them, but after a while, when does it just look like you're going through tracks for an hour and 10 minutes?
It's very similar to it's not specific to F-Zero either. You can take the Mega Man block or the Zelda block or whatever, what have you. If you put a bunch of the same game in a row, is it going to start to look too similar to each other, or is there going to hit a point where you're burnt out on that series and would like to see something else?
Right.
On the other hand, I thought all three of the F-Zero games together at HQ were all very well received, and even together. So I think the 4th game is the problem. It's just the fact that all the games, the runs are much longer too than the last run.
Sure. Like last year, it ended up being X didn't be with the group. X was a few days later because obviously WMJ got sick, and GX was a much shorter category. It was just story mode, so you only had to do about an hour and a half worth of F-Zero in a row. I'm a little worried if we're gonna have, what is this gonna end up being, like 3 hours, more than 3 hours, like 3.5 hours of F-Zero in a row. I don't know that feels like a lot if you're going to have all of Mega Man. And like, obviously, a couple of us here in the call, like we're big Mega Man fans. I worry that's too much.
Yeah, I'm definitely in that boat where it's like, I'm a huge fan of Mega Man, but
there's like 4 or 5
after a while, you cannot fight the fact that it's going to feel samey after a while.
Right. I'm not going to want to sit in the room for 7 hours for Mega Man. I can guarantee that. So,
well, you asked if they look similar. No, one's a SNES, one's an N64, and there's like 2 GameCube ones. But I mean, at the end of the day, to the casual viewer that reads 4 F-Zero games, you see futuristic car racing around a loop, complete 3 laps. Now, I will give you this, Naglaria, having them back, whatever, gives you the chance to prove that they are different games, tech-wise.
Sure.
Because I can certainly, believe you on paper right now, but to me, who knows nothing about F-Zero games...
We lost Test Runner. Keep going.
Oh, no. To me, that knows nothing about the games, I see this and I think 4 games in a row about futuristic cars going around in a circle on different consoles. Mm-hmm. So this will be a good proving ground to see if your point is correct, that the casual viewer after this marathon is going to know that these are completely different games spec-wise.
I'm cutting you off there. That's
Yeah, and just to add to that, not just F-Zero. We're going to see Sonic. We're going to see Mega Man. We're going to see Mario. We're going to see a lot of game series kind of prove themselves to like, no, we can hold our own water for this long. That fan bases will want to stick around and watch all this Mario Kart, Zelda. We got plenty of it, so we'll see.
Yeah, I guess like the final thought that I have anyway on it is you look at the final day of games, and it really does feel like you're getting a lot of different series back to back, and you're getting that kind of variety that I'm talking about. You know, you're getting a Final Fantasy, and then you're getting Super Metroid. Those aren't similar. Don't tell me that they're similar. They're not. Then you
Well,
Super Metroid, you're going to a Zelda, and before Final Fantasy, you've got Dark Souls, and before that, you've got Minecraft. They're very different games, but they can kind of play off of each other because they're so different that it creates a really unique final day, in my opinion. I would like to see more of that, where maybe you only have one Sonic game on Monday, and then you put one Mario game next to that, but you kind of create individual days of excitement rather than 4 hours of excitement at this one spot, and another 4 hours over here. That's my thought anyway. But on that note, we should probably wrap up because we've been here for quite a while. And if we say anything more, we'll probably be getting tons of hate mail. I don't know. So let's move on to the speech. Whoever it might be, whoever didn't feel like they got enough of what they wanted to say, whoever needs that final 30 seconds. Who's it going to be?
Gosh.
The
All right.
speech.
We're here. Okay.
I
Okay, I guess I'll just say once again, kind of bouncing off of everything we've said again, so much of this is about the schedule. So much of this has been criticism. But to go back to, Test Runner talked about, what's hard about putting these marathons together. I don't envy Mike Uyama's job.
No, not at all.
We all are very grateful that someone has taken the helm and put these together. And these marathons have been a huge amount of fun to go to. None of us are exactly jumping ship. We all want to go. So just shout outs to Mike and the committee for doing a pretty thankless job, throughout the year.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, there's a bunch of really cool games on the series. And yeah, I do want to see 4 F-Zero games. It'll be fun.
Right.
But, we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth noting that it's very easy to interpret criticism as like a negative thing and say like, oh, this is us hating on an event or something. But at the end of the day, the reason that we all have criticism or we have feedback for something is because we want to make it better. Whether or not what we have to say makes it better, who knows? But it just shows that everybody is invested in it and wants to see it do well. So yeah, I'm with you. I think the games lineup itself is really solid for AGDQ. I'm looking forward to it, so there's gonna be a lot to watch. So cool. Anybody doing anything exciting this weekend? You wanna plug something? I think you should get Mega Marathon plugged in there while we get a chance here.
Yeah.
go for it.
So
Since that's ongoing.
Mega Marathon's still going on through really Monday afternoon. We got 2 back-to-back long runs at the end, but we have some really great stuff going on. I think Super Metroid is going on right now, actually, if my time is correct. And then we still got stuff like Minish Cap, Donkey Kong Land, DK64, and just recently added, I think this was late last night, is Peach is actually going to be doing a 16-star one-hand. That will be coming up.
That. Okay.
Yes. But, there's also some underrated runs coming up. Animal Crossing ZL Debts. It's not like the most exciting thing in the world, but it's pretty wacky, and it's a lot of fun to watch. We got, Zero the Kamikaze Squirrel, which is like another one of those little cult games that's actually got some pretty interesting speed tech. So we got a good balance of things, and not to mention Raindrop Dry, who is one of the runners we're trying to support, is got his run of New Super Marisa Land coming up. I think tomorrow evening.
Sounds good. I'm guessing, I don't want to predict, but I'm guessing Spike's got that raid target in mind. So, well, there you go. Well, anyway.
This one was pretty obvious.
Test Runner, got any plans coming up here for the weekend? Anything you gonna try to sneak some speed gaming in, or too busy?
Well, I guess the only thing speed running related would be like live split stuff. Which
Okay.
yeah, I recently put out the new Subsplit update, so that's exciting. And I'm trying to work with Woofer ZFG and Crazy more on some of the Lysa core to get the multi-window support working and stuff like
Nice.
that.
That's
So-
quickly becoming the timer of choice too. I'm seeing it
Yeah,
everywhere. There's occasionally one like LAN fair guy standing alone on an
Still
island somewhere.
hanging out.
Cool kid's like gonna go down, die trying defending LAN fair, but no, Live Split's been doing some pretty cool things, so good to see lots of people adopting that. All right, I guess that's gonna do it for us this weekend. Unless Spike, you want to jump in with a quick plug?
Oh.
Yes.
He's already
Go-
spamming links.
What are we rating?
Just go check out Mega Marathon.
All
Just go
right.
check it out.
All right,
There it is.
that sounds good to me. I guess we'll do that. Have a good rest of the weekend, everybody. We'll be back here next weekend with another episode. So just remember that your run's not over until you hit the final split. We'll see you guys next week.